I'm Steve Massaro, VP of Partnerships at Headlight. For those of you who haven't heard of us or haven't had the opportunity to partner with us, we're a full service agency that supports apps and games at wherever they are in their life cycle, on full funnel media management, creative production, and then everyone's favorite topic, our in-house analytics consultancy. I think many people in the industry obviously know that there are challenges when it comes to bridging the gap between creative and growth, and very excited to be able to work with these two amazing people, Mike and Sharon, who I'll kick it over to you to introduce themselves and their teams.
Hi guys, I'm Sharon. I'm the VP of Creative at Headlight. I absolutely love my team. It's a team of creatives inside a performance marketing agency. I'm sure all of you guys have some sort of creative team in your companies, and I think something that's really beautiful about a creative that understands data is that it's a creative that's ahead of everyone else, right? Our creative team works in tandem with the growth team, which Mike is about to introduce.
Thank you, Sharon. So I'm Mike O'Brien. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Headlight. My background is primarily in growth, so oversaw the development of that team. And prior to Headlight was in-house running growth teams. But you're going to get two different perspectives, I think, up here today. My background originally is very much math, science, physics, engineering, and kind of came into the growth world through that lens. So very interested in the mechanics, modeling of problems, and experimentation, how we understand what's working, impact analysis, and things like that.
One of the things too, so it's great. Like, my favorite part about my job is that we get to work with a lot of brands that are very prevalent in my life. There are a lot of apps and games that I use or play, and you'll see a ton of examples that are rotating up. Obviously, after the panel, if you have any questions about our activations with them, definitely grab Sharon. Cool. So I think bringing it back to the start of a creative process, every team approaches it differently. I think that there's definitely a lot of pain points that we all feel in getting things up and running. Mike, as a co-founder, you've seen the evolution of our agency, the hiring of Sharon, the building out of our creative production team. What are some of the benefits that you've seen for us really integrating our teams so well, and how have you seen that actually play out?
Yeah, so I think first it's important to say that the vision of Headlight is very much at the intersection and the integration of the teams that across creative, analytics, and growth. That those we see as almost inextricable from each other now. That the growth team's SOW, when we're working with clients and like how we solve our problems is. What is our creative testing protocol? What is our measurement strategy for understanding the impact? So the integration is fundamental. And I think that there's some obvious low-hanging fruit, and when we think about integration, what the benefits are, there's, the growth team is typically closer to the data, living and breathing it day in and day out, the understanding of like what's working, where are the key hypotheses ahead of us, and just closer communication on that leads to more work that's on point, right? Pretty obvious. And then in terms of, I think zooming out though, that there's kind of a macro project there, which is typically a creative team and a growth team speak two different operational languages. And there's a chasm between them. A creative has the vocabulary and the understanding of the creative space, and oftentimes it's hard to translate between them. A growth person will have a hard time writing a brief because they don't speak the creative language, and vice versa. Sometimes the creative team will understand the tools that they have, but be missing some of the business cases that we're trying to solve for. And so reducing translation time just is, we want our creative people to understand the data. We want our growth people to understand creative language, and kind of both borrow, aspects of each of the teams. And yeah, so I think in that, is overall it leads to just a better output, right? Where we're able to, be more efficient, and kind of put up more wins.
For sure. Show of hands, who enjoys their creative briefing process, or thinks, actually, let me change that. Who thinks you can optimize your creative briefing process better? Yes, I think everyone can. Sharon, I think for us, having so many people that are involved, and that's just internal, I think we've definitely seen a lot of examples of where there could be too many cooks in the kitchen. Thinking about our briefing process when we're working with a brand's internal team, who should be involved and then who should actually champion the process?
For sure. First of all, I'm going to do a gut check of like how many creatives we have in the room versus how many marketers we have in the room to make sure that I cater my answer correctly. How many creatives do we have? 2 creatives, okay. And then the rest, can I assume marketers, analysts, the type of thing? All right, awesome. So, I mean, personally, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys also suffer from like the too many cooks in the kitchen situation on the brief process. I would say, you know, simplicity is key, but it's important to have one representation, one rep on each side of on each team, really. So personally, I think it's important to have someone on the creative side, that being brand or that being on the performance creative side, and someone on the marketing side leading and representing each of the teams. Obviously, every team comes in with their own agenda. So the brand team is gonna, you know, want to make sure that from an awareness level, from like a messaging, like a visual point of view, things are like beautiful and amazing. But at the same time, perhaps that's not really like the goal of the marketer, depending on the campaign. So we want to make sure that both the creative lead and the marketing lead on the brand side are present in the briefing process and really narrow down all the feedback that might be coming from the multiple different stakeholders on the brand side. And on the agency side, we do exactly the same. So we might have a creative lead on or creative team working in tandem with someone on the growth team, kind of like really understanding and questioning each side of each part of the brief on the brand side to make sure that we're tackling all issues correctly. Yeah. Do you guys find that that's kind of like what's happening right now, or do you mostly have like one marketing representing? I'm curious about the creatives.
Well, there's 2 creative teams on our team. So I'm in product design, and then the marketing creative have a very different process. Yeah. And so for our team, it's like the PM and myself, and like, so it's very like streamlined. Their marketing process is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Right. And I will say, like, use the brief as an opportunity to like align internally on like what the hell is going on, you know, because we've had so many clients that once we, you know, give them the brief for a specific campaign, they actually almost kind of like have a bit of an identity crisis, and they realize, oh wait, there's so many questions that we haven't even asked ourselves. So it's like a therapy moment, honestly, for the brand, right? So I think it's really important to take you know, your time to really think about what you want to get out of that specific campaign and really utilize it to align goals internally, and obviously let the agency do their thing, because that's why obviously you hire them at the end of the day, right?
Amazing. And something you just hit on, you know, every campaign is going to be approached differently. I think one of the most common things we're starting to see across our client base is that we're obviously supporting on getting them up and running with evergreen campaigns to build stable growth, but we're also starting to work with them on, you know, pulse or spot campaigns that are either in reaction to something or pushing an offer. You know, I think growth and creative, tackling those 2 different functionalities of a campaign, has been something that's been really great to see. Would love to hear how our teams on both growth and creative really start to approach that.
You know, at the top of the question, there is an element of risk to short-term deployments these days when you're thinking about, you know, running ads on platforms that have become largely, you know, algorithmic machine learning, and where there's a ton of modeling going on, right? And so there's this need to have longevity, history, and momentum, essentially, right, with ad campaigns. And so, you know, thinking about choosing your spots, right, for things that are more short-term focused, and those can include things like testing, right? And so I think that in the bucket on this, you know, there's this can either be a seasonal moment, an offer, something that's, you know, a sale, or how we think about creative testing generally, right? That's something that we isolate from the rest of our account. So like the heart of the question, I think, for the growth answer is, you know, how do we protect the longevity, the momentum of our core media? Because, you know, places like Meta, Google, very much running on these algorithms that really require data running through the pipes. And so, short-term thinking can put that at risk. And so you're thinking about it really architecturally, like how do I make space in our media planning that protects that and carves out space for us to operate free of that bigger picture in that short term, whether it's testing or seasonal. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, at Headlight, so our creative team does bi-weekly, monthly, like net new concepts across every single one of our clients. And we're always trying to analyze performance on a day-to-day to really figure it out. What is that we can, improve? What is that we can iterate on? That's on an evergreen basis, right? And so with those, complete net new, like disruptive ideas, we're kind of like understanding already what are the structures in terms of like a creative that might actually work specifically for like a seasonal moment, right? So, and when it comes to those spot campaigns or like those seasonal campaigns, it's not about reinventing the wheel. Obviously, we want to like make sure that we're catching attention and we want to be bold, but it's about using structures, using messaging, using specific personas, using a specific format that we know for a fact that has worked on an evergreen testing approach, and basically leveraging that kind of like modularity in the ad to then convert it into like that promo ad or that seasonal ad, etc. So it's really being smart about your resources. And I think also too, building everything in a modular way so you can be quick about those iterations for promo campaigns.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add is one of the challenges that you have to face on the growth side and running the media is around goals of the campaign and how you input them within the platforms and the impact that it has on how ads run. This kind of going back to the algorithmic decision making on the platforms and kind of what Sharon was getting at with borrowing from the evergreen strategy to make things work. Substituting, if you're very bottom of the funnel, profit margin focused ROAS campaigns or conversion campaigns focused on your goals in your evergreen, even if you are running a campaign for the day, the week, right, for a seasonal spot moment, switching of the goal, to something like video view or something more up funnel will fundamentally change the audience that you're reaching, right? There's a lot of decision making that happens at the goal level, and sometimes you're really forced between two bad decisions of do I break the best practices of a channel and kind of go with a really short-term spike on a campaign that's supposed to get some learning time, like a conversion-based campaign goal, or do I risk reaching a very different audience because I changed my goal from what I typically do in terms of like a conversion-oriented goal and switching to something like video view, video completes, right? I think our pattern is typically to focus on the things that we know are working in our scaled evergreen strategies to try to get more of that similarity between what our typical focus is from our campaigns.
For sure. I feel like we were just talking about it, how no matter what, we're always going to get asked to produce more creatives. And it's such a loaded question because obviously it varies by the brand, the campaign strategy. Mike, how does the growth team really approach figuring out what's the right number of assets to actually roll out for an initial campaign or any campaign?
Yeah, I think of this as like a decision science problem where you're trying to optimize costs across the cost of production, the cost of investment to learn, time to market, and things like that, and as well as your ability to learn broadly in different directions. So the way what we typically structure it to optimize that flow is to do really big conceptual bets up front in a really low production cost way. So that, to put it into plain terms, it's very different concepts of visual positioning, like those really macro ideas of what's in the creative, but focusing them on static iteration. Statics are quick to produce. You can deploy them quickly. There's typically less feedback and less revision that goes into them as well. And trying to find repeatable wins in those elements before you dedicate production time to say like a 60-second YouTube or TV spot, right? So building on fundamentals of like we've proved that those are the words that work. The value props that resonated with the right audience, things like that, before you start increasing production costs. And I think that's at the top. And then the question is, how does that look once you get deeper into the marketing program? That's at launch of a creative testing cycle. Deeper in, it's about taking the winners that from those conceptual tests. And I would say it's roughly like an 80-20 rule here on like investment time, towards 80% focusing on continuing to expand the concept universe, new concepts that are breaking into new audiences, resonating on different value props and things like that. And then 20% of that production to iterations on what's won before. And I think we've been seeing you can up to 5+ iteration cycles continuing to sustain winning assets. So it's definitely something that is, I think, really beneficial for sustaining an ad account against ad fatigue, for even just honing in on what was it about a given asset or concept that was actually working, by taking the big win and then honing in on which element was really the determining factor there, and then informing the rest of the production cycle like that. So that's how we think about it.
For sure. And I think that one of the biggest things that we bring is that testing strategy and approach. I always say it, but it's one of my favorite things when you're on a pitch and you're like, we are a data-driven creative team. Obviously, when we're having so much overlap with growth and creative, you guys are getting a ton of data from them on performance. Tell me a little bit more about the types of data that your team is using to guide, obviously not just production, but optimization of the creatives that we have in market.
Yeah, totally. So I would say, it depends on the campaign objective and the specific level of like awareness that you're having in those campaigns. But I would say if your creative team is not right now talking to your performance team or talking to your data team, that's a problem. I would say like get them together in a room. If you guys are remote, have them together in Zoom and like have them start talking and really even have like the junior designers understand the metrics and understand like what is really going on with those campaigns. It's super important because once they understand really like what's going on Meta, what's going on Google, what's going on with literally every channel that you're on, they're going to really identify certain patterns across different channels and across different creative concepts that it's going to be absolutely natural to them to come up with insights and come up with recommendations to the client. And overall, I think that's gonna like lift the weight of your growth team's shoulders. Because the creatives are the ones coming up with the recommendations directly. And as I said before, I think a creative that understands data is going to be ahead of everyone else. And I think it's super important. So everyone in our team, doesn't matter, if they come from like a super large agency, if it comes from like an in-house massive brand, you'll be surprised. There's a lot of designers, there's a lot of motion designers that have no idea like what a CTR is. It's really crazy. And so it's important to, once they come in, train them early because they're going to be much versed in what really is going on. And this thing is going to continue to get even more and more complex on a day-to-day. There's so much competition. There's so many new channels. There's so many new types of campaigns, right? So yeah, we really think that's super important.
I mean, it's great. And I'm sure the MMPs would love to hear that, since all of them are rolling out creative reporting within their platforms. So all designers should be in there. One of the things that I'd love to hear, obviously knowing that we are so data driven, I think obviously it's really important to test, but you obviously need to adapt if it's a winner or a losing concept. How quickly can you normally see that something is either performing really well in a winner or needs to be sunset because it's not getting that traction?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely an element here of it depends. And one key feature of a healthy creative framework is learning at like a product and channel level what are the key signals and metrics of your program. So that is win rate and fatigue rate and things like that, and what are the benchmarks for identifying that, and how long does it typically need to be tested, and what scale, right? Those are all unique challenges based on your goals and the conversion rates of your product and what's necessary on each platform. But I think to cut through to some tangibles within a week, typically on a social platform, and it's usually just a few days. And the upper outlier, I would say, is is usually within a day you can really see the upper outliers on performance, and those are really fun when you feel like you've really cracked into something.
Something else that I will say from a creative POV is I think marketers, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are always looking at like the top ad. Like that's the one that's legacy, that's the one that's been working for a while. Let's continue like hitting with that ad. For us, I think it's really important too to like remember the silver and bronze medals as well. Okay, like what other creatives actually like did okay, maybe they didn't do incredible, but there's opportunity there. And so I think it's also important to kind of like save those and give them a second chance. Maybe improve them based on what we see the top ad is actually doing, apply those learnings. That's why we make things modular. That's why even from a static or a video perspective, things can be iterated and really give them the chance to perform again. Now, if they continue to be bronze for 3 tests in a row, then obviously kill them, but definitely give them the chance.
And one thing I love to add to that is from the growth side, we've been seeing this trend, I think, stemming from privacy changes and the kind of, again, like the machine learning algorithms, that targeting isn't really what it used to be. That we are thinking as the creative concepts and the diversity of those, like who they resonate with, being our targeting level. So the silver and bronze creatives do become even more important when you put that lens on it, which is those are unique personas of people that you're now reaching successfully, even if they are a lower scale than your gold medal champion ad. That represents incremental audience that you're reaching, and so much of the targeting level occurs with the platforms basically seeing who are your creatives resonating with and applying targeting that way. Oftentimes you're in a pretty broad targeting selection, so that you're not really overlaying those filters yourself and letting the creative, basically people raise their hands with like, hey, this creative speaks to me and I like what it's putting out there, and like that being learning on that level of who those people are. So.
I feel like that's something we're hearing so much more common from the DSPs on the programmatic side. Obviously, to keep costs down, you're expanding your targeting, but you're obviously putting a certain feature, a certain category to be able to actually get that targeting without infringing on the cost. One of the things that we've touched on a little bit is being able to figure out when an ad is fatigued. Obviously, that's something that requires insights from both creative and growth, but would love to hear a little bit more about when we actually see those signs and how we respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that we love integrating into our creative process is a performance pod. So we have basically folks exclusively dedicated to make, several different variations of something that we know has performed before to give, extra shelf life to that specific concept. And I think too, something that it's really important is, again, not only focus on that gold medal, but on, obviously, depending on your resources, on a bi-weekly or like monthly basis, continue to add completely disrupted, like out of the box, new ad concepts that you never tried before, especially on platforms like Meta, especially on platforms like Google, YouTube obviously as well, TikTok obviously huge right now. You have to continuously add net new ideas to figure out really what's working. And as Mike said before, it's super easy to test out complete new messaging, even from like a static perspective. It's really cheap, it's really quick, right? That then you can go ahead and do a UGC ad, hire that $3,000 creator to actually communicate the messaging that we know has worked before, right? And then from there you can actually do that long form CTV, like higher quality ad using what we know has worked on the static side, has worked on the UGC side. So being really smart about those resources and how you iterate.
And then on the growth side, I think that it's largely about forecasting fatigue and getting out ahead of it. Because I think going back to the longevity momentum question, you want to avoid at all costs a winding down of your account because of the key ads fatigued, and then you have to rebuild that momentum because that's chaos, that's cost. That's also maybe the likelihood that it's hard to rebuild and get back into that seat of power. So I think that every company should have a scoreboard of like creative metrics that are really well understood across both growth and creative, and those are like the success metrics of a creative testing program. So things like the fatigue rates, the win rate. So the percentage of ads that we deploy, what is the win rate of those? Like, is it 2 out of 10? That's 2 out of 10 to 4 out of 10 is kind of what we typically see as possible and healthy. It's kind of like baseball. You're going to strike out more than you get hits, but those are all pieces of a healthy puzzle there. And so you can do the math then really easily about, okay, what is the volume that I need to be kind of keeping going through the pipes? If I know that the ads that are live right now are going to fatigue at some point, most likely, and I know that I only get this percentage of wins, then I can tell the creative team, this is the asset volume that we need to be keeping up on a biweekly or monthly level based on those metrics. And those update over time. So this is like a learning experience that's recursive that, as you are getting better and honing in on concepts that are working well, you should hopefully see those numbers go up, win rates going up, because you're getting a little bit better at predicting what's going to work. And you're informing those numbers with more and more data, more and more cycles of production, and better understanding them. And I think that predictability is, leads to, sustained performance, which is a big piece these days.
For sure. So thinking ahead to obviously a very, very busy next few months, we have an election, we have the holidays, 2025 is right around the corner. I think everyone has certain topics when it comes to growth and creative that are very top of mind. So going through a few, starting off with UGC, we've had conversations today where we talk about how prevalent creator marketing is within our approach to obviously servicing our clients. Would love to hear what you guys think is going to kind of play out over the next few months.
Yeah, we have a couple of busy months ahead. I mean, I think UGC is here to stay. It's not a new topic. It's going to continue being relevant, and it's obviously a great opportunity to highlight, multiple different personas from like a transparency point of view on topics like there's, so important like the election coming up, or when folks have decision fatigue ahead of the holidays, content creators, I'm not saying influencers particularly, right? Like I'm talking about like micro content creators, like people like you and I, I'm not a content creator. Like people don't want to hear me talk honestly all the time, but it's important to continue like bringing those folks to and add them to your ad mix, again, with maybe messaging that you've tested out before on the static side, for example, to really highlight your product. I also think, it's super important to use that also as a framework to think about like, what different generations are thinking and how, obviously like you have Gen Z, you have the millennials, you have, Gen X, whatever, right? But right now I feel like we're all kind of like merged together. It's really interesting. For example, I saw this trend recently about, for example, the Armory Museum in London, for example, had this, super legacy. He probably is like in his 60s, I don't know, like marketing guy, reading a script from a Gen Z employee, kind of like, and it's a new trend. It's like Gen Z writes a script of an ad, and it's like this guy that it's like 60 doing that, and that resonated so well for the Armory Museum. It's crazy, So thinking about how we add a little bit of humor too in this like super test environment that we're in right now, obviously with everything going on in the world, making your product relatable, and just continue to stay relevant in that aspect. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things that we've hit on a couple times, and maybe it's because we've heard a couple brands say that they're not doing UGC because it didn't work out, definitely retry it. Like, once again, if you figure out your messaging, like we definitely go from like a social first and then roll it out to other channels approach. Like, I think UGC, like you mentioned, can resonate with such a good market and has such authenticity that definitely try it again.
Yeah, I've been surprised at the categories that UGC works for. The gaming, for one, that was one that surprised me.
Yeah.
But I would have been wrong about the viability of Twitch as a platform. Just like, who wants to watch other people play video games? If I were going off of my own biases there, that would have been totally wrong. And yeah, well, I guess one thing that after UGC's been with us for some time. One lesson we've learned, I think, over the cycles of doing it is you can get bit by relying on third parties and especially on like production timelines. And so I think one place where we've gotten better that I would recommend everyone thinking about is like, how do I design the request out the gate to give us flexibility down the road, knowing that at times working with creators outside of the company, there's going to be slow response times or not really a great alignment with expectations and what you're getting. I kind of imagine it like the Lego boxes that they do now, where it's like a 3-in-1, where you get to three different designs from one box of Legos. That if you design your script with some optionality in it, that gives you that that ability to say like, hey, like we're going to expect that this might take longer than something we're doing in house. That's kind of a given. And two, once we in order to manage that problem, we have a little bit more optionality when we receive that content.
And sorry, I'm really passionate about this specific concept. But I actually think if you work for a specific brand in the company that you feel like, no, UGC is not gonna work for us, like from the get-go, please try it. For example, we work with brands like Away, right? Away, a DTC client. Obviously, UGC works super well for them, right? It's like they rely most of their marketing on that, and it's great. But then, we also work with B2B brands like Spot On, which is a POS system. And the, head of marketing there was very much against UGC. No, we need to be taken seriously, all of that stuff. We actually convinced them to try UGC hooks on highly elevated ads, and that absolutely killed it, So stay open-minded and try new things all the time. I think it's super important.
Agreed. And I mean, it's still kind of crazy, like how it's worked for finance, it's worked for health and wellness brands, pharmaceuticals, so definitely exciting. Obviously, because there's another panel on it. AI, I think, is everywhere right now. I think all of us use ChatGPT a lot. In a lot of our partner meetings, there's so many more AI-branded capabilities and services that are in the mix. How has AI kind of started to make a place within Headlight, and how do you see that evolving as we go into next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already seeing some positive impacts in terms of efficiency and just the helper aspect on experiment ideas. Those can be copy and conceptual directions. Just basically using it as a brainstorm buddy. And fueling the brainstorm. I think though that there might be a distraction element where it might seem like because production costs might go down to zero that that might just radically change some of the picture on experimentation. But I think that there are other costs that are associated with creative testing that are still going to be really fundamental, and that's kind of the opportunity cost of what's in market versus not. And you can only really learn at volume on so many things at once, right? And so even if you have access to low production costs or near zero production costs, there's still costs to balance in the framework of testing, and those still need to be managed. Like that strategic thinking there is still of critical importance, and it's really similar to what we face today, even with some production costs associated. And even when you have access to say like, have ChatGPT make me 100 taglines or ad copy ideas, it's not guaranteed that it's inclusive of the right ones. It is, they are assets, but are they the right ones? And that level of strategic thinking, I think, is again, like it doesn't take away the need for a brief. It doesn't need to take away the need to even read the data and what's actually working or what hypothesis we have to drive things. And so I think that there's some elements that are actually going to really stay the same, even with that addition.
Yeah, I would say on the creative side, obviously there was a high anxiety in my team. Obviously, when AI kind of really started kicking, and I would say I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but I'll just say it again: is AI is not, at least on the creative side, on the production side, I don't think it's here to replace anyone. It's here to really help everyone out, right? Kind of do their jobs a little bit better, a little bit faster, maybe make them think about things that they haven't thought about before. I think one of the first things that a lot of my creative friends were scared of is especially copywriters, for example, right? With ChatGPT being kind of one of the most accessible, easy to use tools, it's they're gonna start laying off copywriters. Absolutely not. I mean, we just hire a couple of copywriters, right? Because I think it's about making your folks connoisseurs, really orchestrators, curators of what makes sense or not when it comes to all of those outputs, when it comes to AI. And I mean, for us, I think it's super exciting. There's so many new, really great tools when it comes to like generating AI video or AI imagery, obviously new messaging, new concepts. So we love exploring it, but obviously we want to make sure that the folks in our team are the ones ultimately managing and curating like really what gets put out in the world.
Definitely. And obviously you can't be replaced.
Thank you.
We only have a few minutes left, so if we want to open it up for any questions that you guys might have. Obviously, Sharon and Mike bring a ton of experience, so definitely make use of them while they're here.
I've got a couple questions. So first question is, you mentioned earlier that sometimes, or not, when you decide to change a goal within like your creative, they'll change the segmentation. In which case would you want to create or change the segment or change the goal?
I think that question requires really stepping back and thinking about not just this problem in front of you, but how the problem ties in to the bigger picture and bottom line for the business. I think even there's probably differing opinions on this with you room full of marketers, but like how should you look at brand and awareness, top of funnel marketing? I think that it always needs to be connected by some hypothesis to how it leads to profit. Or like a long-term profitable decision, depending on how you define profit there. And so I know that that's a big it depends answer there. So I would say that there are times where it makes sense to actually push back and do some saying of no on certain types of campaigns if they fit. Like it's almost like that brief question that you described, where if you give a brand a brief and they realize, man, we haven't asked ourselves some of these questions. That moment happens, I think, in some of these scenarios where, hey, we've got the short-term campaign and it won't work if we don't do it with it unless we use a top-of-funnel goal. And then you ask the question like, well, then should we really be doing it if it's going to be breaking for these reasons? So yeah.
Like Sharon mentioned, there's a lot of therapy that happens with rolling out creatives.
But yeah, I think like so the answers to that like architectural thinking in those scenarios is making sure that you've got a measurement plan in place to tie the picture together, right? And so then I think like everything becomes open if it's supported by like that kind of rigorous thinking that it's the full picture. It's why this creative, why this positioning of the product, like why are we putting in this placement? How are we tracking its impact on the business? And those pictures become, a step back from what's reported in the platform and more around like a kind of a more scientific approach to like the incrementality that it's driving to the business.
As a follow-up, when you do like multi-channel like type things, for example, we'll have an ad that goes to the App Store, and then we track both of the metrics on that. And so like one ad, for example, like did really great, but no one actually downloaded like the app based on that ad. So now we're iterating on that, like that value we're on there. So do you track those separately, or how do you?
Well, there's going to be multiple definitions of great and like performance, right? There's the in-platform performance, because we know that to Meta it matters the amount of people who are stopping and watching your video or clicking on your ad, and that'll like that metric alone. So remove the whole other picture will help it do well within the platform, right? So that matters, even if it's not what ultimately matters to your business. And so you're kind of triangulating a couple of definitions of good, but you need to. So like when you said, "Oh, it did great," my first question, I've had these conversations so many times, was like, "Well, what are you defining as great?" Was it a great click-through rate, or if no one downloaded it, did it do great? Like, did people download it and you just didn't track it effectively? Things like that, right? And so it kind of opens a lot of more doors than it answers, I would say. But hopefully that kind of like that it's a thinking framework more than it has like one answer, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I feel like one of our biggest things that we do at the start of like an engagement is figuring out what that source of truth is. And I feel like getting your clients or your internal teams aligned on what numbers to operate off of is like the necessary first step for everything. Yes.
You had mentioned using still images as a way to cheaply test new concepts, new USPs. I've heard conflicting advice on that. Some say do it, some say, hey, don't, because still images are totally different. You get different audience, it might not translate. So could you tell us more about the nuances? Does that all consistently work when you've done it, or when has it failed, and when has it worked?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to couch all of that in the like where we're sitting in the maturity of the marketing program, that you might not achieve your break even target initially on this set of creatives that you're bringing into market, right? It might be more around establishing line of sight and distilling with data what's working and what's not as like a component, but thinking of it as building towards the future and not judging it exclusively on, is this solving my marketing goals exclusively? Because I would agree with you that you can definitely run into those problems. And I think that there is the chance, right, that I could imagine that you would need a video if you're talking about maybe like establishing a new behavior in a consumer. A static image might fall short in translating what this product is to a consumer, right? And actually doing an effective job of kind of bringing them to the point of interest and purchase. Those are more unique cases, and so I think that there's an element here of like, this is probably true most of the time, and that if you think about it as establishing the components and not as the end of the road, that I think that's the way that this would work, and not necessarily being the final solution for creative.
Appreciate that. I think my worry is if it could lead me astray, and even as part of the process, and not obviously, the image itself isn't going to reach the ROA, the ROAS goals, or whatever, but it's just part of the process. I've done it probably not well, or I'm trying to do image testing or just to get copy testing, and it looks great. I've honed it off many iterations of copy testing, and then maybe I just didn't make the video very well in the end, but the thing just didn't work. I'm like, I spent 3 weeks copy testing on the image. I should have just gone straight to video or something.
No, I totally get you. I mean, I think it's like, again, don't take this as the final advice, only do static. I mean, as a creative, we think like a healthy, ad mix is a little bit of everything, you know what I mean? But I think it's reminding ourselves that, when I'm sure, you guys have like brand teams like working on like massive out-of-home campaigns, that take months and so much money to plan, but maybe they haven't really done the testing on like, okay, that messaging actually works. Use platforms like Meta and like this kind of like messaging testing or search ads testing, etc., to kind of do your research to figure it out like in a cheaply and like quicker way, to then why it's actually going to work on those like massive, large, super expensive and time consuming campaigns. And I think that's kind of like what we're trying to really like relay, because we see this happening all the time. I mean, there's been so many cases recently on, dating apps or whatever else doing like massive campaigns that went really terrible, for example, right? And so I'm thinking maybe you guys should have tested that a little bit, on your social day-to-day campaigns to figure out how that's resonating before actually hiring and getting agencies and spending all this money and time on larger bets. So I hope you know what I'm talking about.
I know we went over quite a little bit. We're obviously here at the conference for the rest of the day. Grab us during the happy hour right after this, but really appreciate you guys coming out. Obviously hope you enjoyed the content.
Thank you for the questions too.